Anybody know any good Bitcoin sea shanties?
Not my department. You have any?
Well, my favorite one's probably not very appropriate.
We'll save that for a late night room. Gotta change your profile picture.
There was actually there's a fellow by the name of BTC Minstrel who's doing some funny stuff, and he had one in the past week that was actually quite topical, but it was basically the entire thing was 1 BTC equals 1 BTC, and doing some nice melodies with himself going around and around. It fit in with my stop caring about the exchange rate quips I've been making.
I love it. Let's have to check it out. Hi, Pete.
Hey, guys.
So what do you say? Should we just do intros and then jump right in since it's the time to start anyways?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for joining. We'll just go ahead and get started. This is Truths and Myths of Bitcoin Privacy and Security. Most of the panel is really passionate. All the panel is passionate about this issue. So, and really excited to hear, especially Jameson's expertise here. My background is I've worked in machine learning and got into privacy through that route and got to work with David Shum, who's a pretty well-known cryptographer, and then just went down the rabbit hole pretty deep. So really appreciate everyone joining and listening in, and I'm excited to learn a lot as well. Jameson, on to you.
Sure. So if we go back far enough, my background is actually anti-privacy. We may, in fact, have a little bit of overlap with regard to that. In my early days, I worked as a back-end cloud infrastructure engineer where I basically for building large reports that would run over petabytes and petabytes of raw analytics data that came in from my employer that would send out 100 million emails a day. And so, that was all marketing based, but while I was never particularly interested in the business itself, it really provided me with some interesting challenges and opened my eyes to how much data gets leaked just as you're going about your business on the internet. And just sort of fortuitously, a number of years later, as I fell down the Bitcoin rabbit hole and eventually started working full-time in the industry, had some events which really made me rethink my own privacy and start to look at the cypherpunk ethos of this ecosystem much more closely. And so for the past few years, I've, as a side project and as a result of some of the attacks against me, put a lot of time, effort, and other resources into trying to push the boundaries of practical privacy in the modern age while still being connected and talking to people and trying to maintain my reputation rather than running off and living in a cave somewhere. So it's a fascinating, complicated, and challenging space just due to the nature of the communication age.
Fascinating. I didn't know that background. Alyse, and then Pete, would love to hear your rabbit hole stories.
Great. Well, it's great to be here with everyone today. And thank you to Amanda, Jameson, Pete, Emily for including me in this conversation on, I think, one of the most important subjects, within the Bitcoin field today. So a bit about my background. I've been in venture capital for about the past decade and in Bitcoin since 2013. I now manage a fund called Stillmark, which is dedicated to companies that are operating in the Bitcoin space and according to Bitcoin's core values and principles. And so one of the companies in Stillmark's portfolio is Casa, and that's because of Casa's pursuit of the provision of security and the option for private security of Bitcoin. And so that's a bit about what I do. By way of background and relationship to the subject of the panel today. My prior work in venture capital, including really heavy investing in the cybersecurity space, including looking at how new and emerging technologies could help companies and individuals increase their online and digital security, and cybersecurity's relationship to Bitcoin and Bitcoin security has always been an area of interest of mine. So I'm excited to really dig into that conversation today. The reason why I came into Bitcoin in 2013 was because I saw Bitcoin as an opportunity for financial tools and a financial platform to be access to that to be democratized, so that folks, regardless of geography or socioeconomic status, could be on a level playing field in some way, and that they had access to transact in the global marketplace.
Cool. Should I jump in?
All you.
Hey everybody, thanks for coming out. So my name is Pete, editor at large at Kraken, one of the world's largest cryptocurrency exchanges. Also editor at Bitcoin Magazine, sort of the leading publication for Bitcoin news and information. Also a Casa customer since early 2020, so of Jameson's company. And probably best known as one of the founding writers and editors over at CoinDesk, and was the editor there for about 5 or 6 years. First got passionate about Bitcoin just because it was a really great, interesting story. Started out navigating the space, trying to do so from a objective lens and trying to inform the public. Over time, become a lot more convinced about Bitcoin as a technology. I think definitely to the extent that I'm able to speak to this discussion, I'm also probably able to bring a layman's perspective. I'm pretty non-technical when it comes to things, and I think that has maybe given me a unique vantage point on how Bitcoin is and Bitcoin services have adopted over time and changed over time. It's certainly Bitcoin has pushed me to become a lot more savvy about certain things that I don't think I would have learned otherwise. Excited for the conversation.
Wonderful. I figured I'd kind of step in here, as helping Amanda organize this. And, all of you guys have different perspectives. You have Jameson coming from more of that, security technical perspective. Alyse working with investing in various companies that are within this ecosystem and being able to really look in how the companies are being built and what they're providing to the world. And then Pete, with you coming from more of that narrative-driven perspective and being able to communicate this to the world. When we get into kind of the meat of this topic, one of the big questions we pose is why should HODLers, why should people investing in Bitcoin, why should they care to have true control of their money? Why is that different when we look at Bitcoin versus, usual, normal government currencies?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'd probably start and just by saying the obvious there, which is that this is the thing that Bitcoin provides that no other digital money or digital unit had ever provided before, right? So this is using Bitcoin, right? I think even though I mentioned I work at Kraken, which is a really large exchange, right? I don't think anyone at Kraken is going to advise people against taking custody of their keys to their Bitcoin. I mean, that's obviously kind of the preferred route, right? Obviously, you have to do so safely, and there's a big learning curve to that, right? So ultimately, is a trade-off, and I think in Kraken and its public outreach, we definitely try to make people aware of this, right? Your choice to trust an exchange or a custodian with your keys, is a choice, and it's one you should make, pretty wisely. When I'm helping onboard and educating people, one of the things that I do off the bat is I just advise them to get their own hardware wallet, which is, pretty cheap device. You can get them between $50 to $70. And, why I suggest that is because, again, this is kind of the point with Bitcoin, that you're able to kind of take custodianship of your money. And then two, I think it's really hard to appreciate Bitcoin if you treat it as a number in an account, right? I say this a lot in Clubhouse rooms of late. If you treat Bitcoin as a number in an account, if you treat it like a stock or treat it like a bond, don't be surprised when you get out of the market early, or you didn't educate yourself enough to appreciate Bitcoin, getting a hardware wallet and taking custody of your Bitcoin is a really kind of easy and cheap way to, get an understanding of what Bitcoin is, right? It allows you to see how a private key functions, how that gives you ownership over your money. And I think, I encourage people to do that because I think it really helps illustrate, what this technology is all about.
Also, the stakes are high. This is not the same type of system that people are used to, where sure, things can go wrong, but if they do, you reach out to a third party, you get support either with the company that was providing with the service, or even in a worst case scenario, if you have somehow been slighted by that company or defrauded or whatever, then you always have a fallback to the legal system to try to force some sort of justice, at which point hopefully the numbers in the ledgers will get updated back to where they were and your assets will be restored to you. But in this system, this is a double-edged sword where on one hand there are no third parties that can stop you from using the system how you want if you're controlling your own keys. But the flip side of that is that if something goes wrong, if there is some sort of catastrophic failure, which a lot of times a single thing that goes wrong can be a catastrophic failure, then you have no recourse. You can file complaints with various authorities, but they're not going to be able to do much for you.
Yeah, no, totally. I think it's definitely a complete different world that we're living in. And, in light of today's price movements and kind of the craze of the last few weeks, I find when I'm sitting in Clubhouse, it's interesting hearing different people describe how things function and different custody solutions and why things are more important over other things. What do you guys feel is kind of one of the biggest maybe pain point in how we're describing how this technology works and how you can keep this stuff secure, especially when we're talking about the various forms. Pete, I know over at Kraken you guys do have your custody side. With Casa, we've got self-custody. What is that? Can we talk a little bit about what do those things mean, and how can people start to really think about the pros and cons of each?
So I think what's important is folks having access to education that helps them understand the trade-offs of the choices they make when it comes to security around Bitcoin. And so while I, of course, am a proponent of self-custody and of multi-sig technology and of Casa, which I think provides these things, with a low barrier to entry, so to a really broad group, I also understand that folks may, choose to use a custodian, and am comfortable with that in certain circumstances. But my concern is that folks understand the trade-offs of those decisions, and so and they understand them before they're faced with the consequences of those trade-offs. So to take a historical perspective, we know that in the last bull market, I think it was, and correct me, Pete or Amanda or Jameson, if my timing is off on this, but I believe in the last bull market is when we saw Bitcoin change fork wars, basically. And at that point, one of the pains that emerged for folks that were using a custodian versus custodying their own Bitcoin was that the custodian was able to control whether or not the user, the Bitcoin owner, actually had access to the coins that were produced in the fork. And that was something, that sort of trade-off or risk wasn't something I think that most understood before they faced it themselves. And I think was a really good sort of demonstration of what it means to hold Bitcoin versus what it means to hold an IOU with a custodian for Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. You can choose to use a custodian, but that's how that choice should be framed. And definitely, if you're going to kind of buy some Bitcoin or buy some cryptocurrency and leave it on exchange, you want to have that mentality that you're choosing to use a custodian, right? You're choosing to trust somebody else to hold your keys. I think there was a recent video that Ledger did that was really interesting. Kind of a commercial type video where they say it's like trusting someone to hold the keys to your house, right? Every time you would want to go in your house, you would have to ask permission, right? And that's a good mental model for what that's like. But you also have to be ready for that, right? I chose to keep my coins, or chose to keep my coins on an exchange for a while because I wasn't ready, right? For me, it was a big kind of fear or pressure, right? Because I thought, okay, what if I mess something up? And even for me, even being in the industry for years, right, I felt that. And I remember relating to Jameson, sort of my experience actually kind of taking my coins off the exchange and eventually, moving them over to a multi-sig setup with Casa. But that was a big psychological thing, right? Even doing it, it was like an emotional experience. Like, it took me a few hours, like over a couple of days. I had to do all this sort of, but even just the feeling that you're taking ownership of your wealth, right? This comes with some psychological trade-offs. And I like to remind people of those because I don't think they're insignificant, right? We do have the tools that allow people to do this, and those tools are easier than they have been before. But they're not going to be for everybody. They might not be for you, and you shouldn't necessarily feel bad about that. I do try to encourage people and try to make it easy or feel a little bit easier to experiment, right? I think the hardware wallets are an easy way to do that. But ultimately, you're going to be the best judge of how ready you are to do this, because it is a big jump, right? We do use banks and financial services in our regular lives, and many of us, we're not sitting in our homes, and we're not sitting on huge mattresses full of cash, right? So there are reasons that you might want to make these trade-offs, and ultimately, you want to assess your own comfort level.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something, Alyse, you brought up a moment ago, there are consequences to not necessarily understanding how this technology functions as far as being able to have pure ownership. Jameson, I know that you talk a lot, and you have on your blog, you have a lot of stories just about typical situations that have gone wrong, and I wonder if you can talk a little bit about some of those scenarios, because I do think as we continue to move forward in this bull run, you have a lot more entrance into this space. And I know myself personally, when I first got in, I didn't really understand that key aspect, and it was more fine with, using Coinbase or whatever to hold my funds because it just felt fine to me. And I didn't truly understand what it meant to actually hold my private keys. So, maybe you could touch on just some high level examples, and from any of you guys, if I think, Pete, even your example of like the fear you had of like kind of moving is another example of just some of the steps we have to take. But I think having some examples is always really helpful for people to understand some of the consequences.
Well, we can make decent guesses at the amount of Bitcoin that has been lost and stolen over the years, and there's good reason to believe that loss is probably about twice as likely to happen to any given Bitcoin holder than a theft situation. And I think that's just because there's such a wider variety of things that can go wrong. Now, you can classify these in two major buckets. The one being you don't hold your keys and they're with a third party, and then one of a million things goes wrong with that third party, and they either lose them or have them stolen or otherwise defraud you, and you can no longer request access to that money. But then on the self-custody side, there's about as many ways to lose access to your Bitcoin as there are ways that you can screw up data storage, because that's really what we're talking about here. Is you have this, there's really only probably a few hundred bytes of data and that is being used to seed all of your private keys for your Bitcoin wallet. And how are you going to store that? Well, obviously a lot of people are going to go buy a hardware device and they're going to use that for their transacting, and that does a really good job of keeping the keys away from hackers, because now that data is no longer on an internet connected device. You've got a physical firewall, and really this like air gap between your keys and the rest of the internet, or at the very least, you are, even when you're plugging it in, there's no way to make calls to that device to extract the private keys from it. But that's only part of the equation, like we said, is keeping your keys from being stolen. So how do you then make sure that you don't lose that data if your house burns down, for example? And this is when people start talking about things like paper wallets or pieces of metal that they put their seed phrase onto. And you start getting into tricky situations where you're making these trade-offs. Once again, this is the common trade-off is between security and convenience. And you're entering into what is really a boring IT data problem. And I suspect that probably most of the people who are listening to this at one point in their lives have suffered from some kind of data loss. Perhaps it's a hard drive crash. Perhaps you had a backup somewhere and then you went to plug it in and you realized that the backup was corrupted, or something happened to that device and you can't actually access it anymore. And so this is how a lot of money has been lost over the years, is either people just not making backups of their keys, and then the one instance that they had either got lost or destroyed, or even if they did make backups, they weren't checking on them regularly, and then when a disaster happened and they went to go retrieve their backup, that was the point at which they realized that the backup was lost or destroyed. So that's just really high level. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of more specific examples, and many of these have actually gotten into mainstream press. And you hear the stories about the guy who has $100 million at the bottom of a landfill somewhere, or the guy who has $100 million sitting on a hardware device that he only has 2 tries left to try to unlock before it wipes itself.
Yeah, I'll jump off of that and say, those are great examples of like personal device failure, but there's also custodian risk too, right? We have seen, exchanges over the years, some of which haven't proved, very trustworthy. I think the classic example, we're coming up next week on the 7th anniversary of, Mt. Gox, which is a famous early Bitcoin exchange that didn't have the kind of security practices that we have today, and didn't keep good practices and safeguard their customers' Bitcoin. I think something like 750,000 Bitcoin were lost when that exchange went offline. But yeah, certainly I think there's no shortage of ways, and there's trade-offs on each side, and I think there's risks either way, right? I think that's another point I would just add there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're seeing a lot more of these stories popping out too in the mainstream press, and I'm sure that is probably driving a lot more of these newcomers into the space to learn a bit more about that actual custody side, which is, in a more traditional sense, not something we typically worry about. The typical population worries about. But Alyse, I've got a question for you now. We're talking a lot about the technical implications of this, case studies of how this has gone wrong. As an investor that is has a really good pulse on like various companies in the space, products in the space that are trying to solve these problems, where do you see this starting to progress? I know that even from 2017 to now, you have, a lot of different solutions that are a lot, from a user experience standpoint, are a lot easier to use and to understand and to conceptualize. Do you see products that you see are starting to evolve into what the next 5 years will look like for custody and security?
Sure, of course. And I shared my bias at the beginning of the call by saying that Stillmark is an investor in Casa, and I'm also on the board of directors at Casa. So what's been most exciting for me to see in 2019 and 2020 was really progress around the maturation of custody products. So this is true both on the consumer or individual user custody side, like Casa provides, or on institutional custody front. And we saw some, major players like a Fidelity, for instance, be able to offer institutional grade custody. And so that was, I think a tipping point, frankly, and especially perhaps on the institutional side, and that one of the blockers for people being able to opt in to being Bitcoiners or to holding Bitcoin was that the custody solutions weren't available. And most folks, regardless of how sophisticated they are, whether they be an individual, an institution, regardless of if that individual is technical or that institution, is staffed with the most brilliant security technologists in the world, folks are, not keen to losing their funds because of a software glitch or a sophisticated hacker. And so when we see products like those that Casa offers for multi-sig technology that feels not like, something that requires a CS degree, from Stanford to master, but instead is just something that, feels like a familiar, like banking app, almost like the banking app that any traditional banking app you would have on your phone. I think that unlocks a whole new sort of community of folks that can now participate. And we've seen the impact of that on the institutional side. And I believe some of what we're seeing today in terms of the diversity of new entrants on the individual side is thanks to products like Casa, where folks feel they are now able to take control of their funds in a way that is, not scary and not keeping anyone up at night.
Yeah, I would add to that, and I would say also that I've been really impressed at how much work that consumers are proving willing to do for Bitcoin. I think this has been something that you saw in many years, entrepreneurs and investors, sort of emphasizing making Bitcoin easier, and often that sort of came with the implicit, unspoken idea that that someone would need to hold their coins for them. So I think it's been really exciting to see on Clubhouse just people asking questions about Ledger wallets, asking questions about Trezor wallets, wanting to understand the difference between the two, and then going out and buying something like a crypto steal and punching letters into a plate of steel, right? I think if you had told somebody 7 or 6 or so years ago that consumers would be willing to do that for Bitcoin because Bitcoin was so valuable and useful to them, I think they would be pretty shocked. So I think we also do have to kind of note that there's the value of Bitcoin is driving people to want to use it, and that's driving them to overcome some hurdles, on the consumer side as well.
I'd also say that these people who are getting into a lot of security research can easily get overwhelmed because the state of private key security is still evolving. It's fairly dynamic, and we're still in a zone where security researchers at various companies are constantly attacking their own hardware and hardware and software at other companies. And so if you as a novice start to pay attention to that space, then it can seem really, really scary because it's probably almost on a weekly basis that some scary new report or vulnerability or whatever will come out, and it will be spun in a way that sounds as if this is a catastrophic issue that everyone should do whatever they can to avoid, even though the actual state of Bitcoin security has progressed by orders of magnitude over the past decade. And so the average user can put themselves into a great position without a ton of effort. Now these reports that come out, generally very extreme edge case esoteric stuff that very theoretical attacks that haven't actually even happened in the wild, which is great. And that's great that the security researchers are thinking so far ahead. But I will say that, like, from a sort of media and ecosystem standpoint, it can still feel very scary and confusing to users. So this is just something that we deal with on the support side a lot. Is there will be a new wave of questions coming in every week or two, like, what is Casa thinking and doing about this crazy new edge case that just got released?
Yeah, so I just want to, say that I completely agree with Pete and Jameson. And to follow up on Jameson's point about the sort of like breaches or possible breaches that get a lot of coverage, I think it's interesting to note that actually perhaps the most significant breach in terms of user impact that we've seen in the past couple months was really a breach around privacy, I think, with the revealing of customer details in the Ledger attack. And I think, Jameson, you've put out a little bit, I think maybe both Pete and Jameson have put out content around this, but it's, I'm not sure that it got as much like press or fanfare because it was maybe a much simpler sort of attack, but it was something that certainly I know was felt in my immediate network of Bitcoiners. And, at least in terms of the way I think about the space, I thought it was, perhaps the most significant for the average user.
Yeah, I can jump off of that and say, at Kraken, we have a whole team called Kraken Security Labs. You can go to our website and check out their landing page there for some more information. But, they're constantly kind of testing and, monitoring what's going on with different consumer hardware wallets. And we publish that information on our Kraken blog, which is just blog.kraken.com. But, to inform customers. And, I would say, there's certainly a push on all sides to get information out there. It is interesting to see what the press picks up on, and I do agree that one was one that we certainly sent a message to our clients about, and that we thought for that sort of that need. But it is interesting with the landfill stories. They tend to be the ones that grab the headlines.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like they're, like Jameson, like you mentioned, it's happening every day. And I actually saw a comment on off of a YouTube video that was a kind of a re-release of a Clubhouse episode in which the guy said, I feel like I have so much to learn. Like this was really cool to listen, but I still feel confused about X, Y, and Z. And I almost wanted to comment to him and say, you can only take on like little bites of the knowledge you learn from people who've been in the space for so long. And that's, I think, can be information overload sometimes for people as well to know how to navigate all of this. I want to touch a bit more on privacy, the privacy aspects. We've been talking a lot about the security side, but also want to encourage everyone, just reset the room for a moment. We are talking about Bitcoin privacy and security and kind of trying to do more of a deep dive on what does that mean and why is it important when you are holding Bitcoin. Joined by Jameson Lopp. Jameson is a security expert, CTO of Casa. Alyse Colleen, who is a managing founder of Stillmart Group. And then Pete Rizzo, who is head of content over at Kraken. So if there are, one thing I would encourage, if there's anyone who has questions as we continue to progress, please do raise hands. We'll start to bring people in here. And I think that we had Matthias, if you want to kind of open the floor up to you, if you have any questions for the group.
Hey, sorry, I don't really have any questions about security because I'm new. I'm just listening.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. Well, if there is any questions that do pop up, please let us know. It looks like we've got someone else, Sheldon, into the room. Get him in here. Sheldon, what questions do you have for us?
Yeah, I was just trying to get my headset on, having a little trouble, but I wanted to ask how you guys who are in more sort of established organizations feel about solutions like KuCoin's Arwen, the kind of things that let you retain your private keys and still be able to interact on an exchange.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that one specifically. Maybe you could share a little bit more about it.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm a U.S. citizen, so I'm not able to fully register on KuCoin and get the service, but I've been looking at it for a while. And it's basically tokenization of private keys so that an exchange doesn't necessarily have to control your wallet, and they don't have to do that DEX sort of integration where it's normal to give up a private key. The Arwin concept is a smart contract tokenizing a private key so that the private key can be applied where it needs to be, but whatever institution is helping trade doesn't need to see that private key. I feel like that's a really big threat to centralized exchanges in the space because tokenization of data is something that happens in my regular IT space stuff, not just in crypto. And I feel like that's going to be a lot more normal in the next few years. I just wonder if, tokenizing private keys as a method of security in Casa or any other product is of interest to you guys.
I would throw that over to Jameson. I think the tokenization of the private key has got me stumped.
Yeah, I mean, that would require much deeper dive into exactly what the mechanics are. I do recall a year ago I was at the MIT Bitcoin Expo when I got to watch the presentation on how Arwin worked, and I seem to recall that it was somewhat like it was basically performing atomic swaps. So like the protocol itself seemed to be pretty sound from what I recall, though I haven't done a super deep dive on it. Really, I think the main problem when you start to talk about these sort of cross-chain contracts is the complexity starts to increase. So you have to worry about the security on both ends. Certainly plenty of interesting things that you can start to build off of that, though. But at least as I recall from the presentation a year ago, it was really presented as a way to do a trustless swap between Bitcoin and Ethereum. I'm not sure if they have taken that and abstracted that out more so that you can do other type of swaps as well. But for that simple case, at least, it certainly sounded secure, though whenever you're doing any type of on-chain swaps or other activity, whether that is an atomic swap or whether that's a second layer network like Lightning or whatever, then a lot of other variables start to come into play, usually regarding edge cases of issues with settlement on the network, especially if there's a lot of volatility in fees or gas prices or whatever. So you have to be careful to design your second layer or your swap protocols to be able to handle those edge cases well.
Maybe to answer that question a little bit more generally, I think the exchanges are open to kind of experimenting with different type models, right? So Shapeshift is a good example where they've recently kind of started transitioning from a custodial exchange to a decentralized exchange, but they also have it so that you can hook up a hardware wallet, their key wallet, to that exchange, and kind of use the exchange, but with a hardware wallet. So I think that's cool, right? I think the exchanges are open to that, right? I think we're very well aware, at Kraken of the risk we pose when clients choose to trust with us with their keys and that responsibility. And as I said before, I don't think you'll hear anyone at the company say that the choice to leave coins at Kraken or any other exchange isn't a choice that you should make with some responsibility, right? Like you're making that choice and you want to be confident about it and understanding of the trade-offs. And I think we're generally supportive of things and don't see them as competitive, right? I think everyone in the space generally feels like we're heading into a direction where we want people to be empowered to have control of their own money.
I appreciate that, and I didn't mean to make it quite so technical as I framed it, but I think the point I'm driving at is that the sort of ethics of CeFi, that the world isn't ready to shake that off. So a pretty even keel medium to me is, hey, we are a centralized exchange, but also we can give you full power over your own assets and stuff like that. So I definitely appreciate the response from y'all.
Definitely.
Wonderful. Thanks, Sheldon. So moving on, Pat, what questions do you have for us?
First, I have a basic question. This sounds funny, but when it says that it's recording, will we be able to find, will this be recorded and uploaded to YouTube and we can re-listen if I have to hop off early, or how does that work?
Yeah. So we'll be adding this to Casa's YouTube channel, and then if you wanted to go to @Casa HODL on Twitter, we'll be distributing it out there.
At Casa HODL on Twitter. Okay, great. Then the second question is, I'm actually a customer of Casa, and so I'm just going through that process. But I'm curious, like, I think it was Jameson heard in one of these other rooms that to practice sending yourself Bitcoin to friends so you get really familiar with your wallets, a tendency would be to be so paranoid that I would screw it up, that I would just let it sit there, and then if the world ended, I would let Casa fix it. I mean, not really, but kind of, right? So what is it? I was just curious if you could get some input from, like, Jameson, whoever. What would be a good way to practice? I honestly do not know anybody that does Bitcoin personally. So what would be a good way, once I do find someone, or how I can do that, just so I feel more comfortable?
Well, the nice thing about Casa is that we added testnet Bitcoin support in there. So you can actually turn this on in Casa, and we can send you testnet Bitcoin, which has no actual value, but works the exact same way, except for a few tiny things under the hood. But the user experience is the exact same. So you can basically ask Casa, just open a ticket, talk to your client advisor, whatever, and we are happy to give you some testnet Bitcoin, and then you can do whatever you want with it, because even if you screw up, you won't have lost anything. And then there's plenty of other testnet wallets out there that we could recommend that your friends get set up with if they don't want to use Casa.
Okay, that's great. And then can you also do it like you can send it to, like, and I'm sorry if I'm so ignorant with the testnet, but can you send it to like a blue wallet? You could send it to your Treasure, you could send it to your Ledger just to practice, or is it just like peer-to-peer, or I don't know?
In most cases, yes. I know that Ledger supports testnet and Ledger Live, but yeah, it's kind of a wallet by wallet basis as to whether or not they will support testnet.
Okay, great.
Yeah, another way is, if you have an account at an exchange and you do have a hardware wallet and you did want to kind of, spend the cost for the transactions over the blockchain to test that out, you could actually kind of do it with yourself as both parties. That's something that I've done before, and depending on how much the fees are, it can get a little pricey, but something you can do also.
Yeah, I just want to get comfortable enough that I don't I just want to get comfortable enough, right? I just want to understand, so.
Yeah, it's going to take time, right? I think you should, you just remember that and just be comfortable with yourself. Like, I mean, it took me a long time. I've certainly eased into different services. I didn't just kind of start using Casa, and I didn't just start having a multi-key sort of setup, right? It was kind of a gradual uptick. I think it is something where I'm not kind of a dive into the deep end of the pool type of person. I kind of go in from the front. So you can definitely do that with Bitcoin too, right? You don't have to. It's better to have a practice and to just get better over time and just put that commitment into being a little bit better about it, or more conscious about it. A little bit here and there.
Okay, thanks a lot, y'all.
Thanks, Pat, for the questions. Next up, Big Slick. What do you got? Doesn't look like we're hearing ya. Okay, I'm gonna move over to Shannon, and then if we can get the sound going with you, Big Slick, we'll get back to you. So Shannon, what questions do you have for us?
Hey, thanks so much. I have a question about multi-sig. One, I'm not sure I understand exactly what it is, and two would be how to move from single sig to multi-sig. I've had a Ledger wallet for a little over a year, and my address and phone number were exposed over the summer, so that was really shitty. I thought that backing up my keys that I got from Ledger and then having 2FA on my exchange would be enough. And I guess, my question is that multi-sig? And if it's not, like, what would I need to add on? Thanks.
Well, I mean, it sounds like you're already well ahead of most people by even having a hardware device. And as long as the 2FA on your exchange is not SMS or phone number based, then like if you're using a rolling Google Authenticator code or some other hardware device, then you're definitely fine because you'll be safe from the more common SIM jacking type of attacks. But to try to describe what multi-sig is, I think a real world analogy that's easy for people to understand is it's like a safety deposit box that you might have at a bank. So if you have a safety deposit box, then you know that there's not just one key on that. There's usually at least two keys. And you're given one key, and then one key is held by an employee at that institution. And so in order to open that box, both of you need to insert and turn your keys at the same time. It's really the same type of thing with a multi-sig Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency type of security. You're basically using functionality of the protocol to describe a situation that tells the entire world that whatever these funds in this address are, they are not allowed to be spent. They're not allowed to be moved unless you see this number of signatures that matches a subset of the following sets of keys. And so when Casa makes it possible for you to generate an address that is, say, a 2 out of 3 or a 3 out of 5 multi-sig, what we're really doing under the hood is we're using the Bitcoin scripting language to describe the set of spending conditions. And that's where we take the keys from multiple different devices and we use those to create a Bitcoin address that says, you need to have this many signatures that match at least this many of these keys. So that is, multi-sig from a technical standpoint. There are ways, kind of what you were alluding to, there are ways to create multi-sig-like conditions that don't actually use multi-sig as part of the protocol, where you can split up keys between different places or whatever. But those tend to have other security trade-offs, and we have a lot of content actually on our website and blog about why we specifically did not choose those in our application.
That's super helpful, thanks. So do you guys choose the additional addresses that line up to make that safety deposit box key, or do I choose those and then you guys wrap that up into the safety deposit key?
Yeah, so basically when you set up a multi-sig at Casa, you are taking multiple hardware devices and your phone, and you are generating these private keys on your devices. Casa will generate one key that we hold, but we will only ever have one key, so that we don't have enough that we would ever be able to spend funds or prevent you from spending funds. And then basically this entire set of keys are then used to generate the addresses on the back end. But from a user experience, it just looks like any other wallet. We abstract away a lot of the more complicated stuff that's happening under the hood.
Thanks so much. I'll check out your website and video. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Shannon. I want to take more questions from the audience, but I wanted to pause for just 1 minute to, we're talking about the various truths and myths that are surrounding how we think about privacy and security with Bitcoin. And I've got a question to kind of pose for Alyse and Pete. This going into somewhat of what I was talking about earlier of what is the next iteration of products and development. And also we kind of get into this idea of education. And I know that Pete, this has been a big part of your career within this space, is creating a lot of the materials that people need when they're asking questions like, what is multi-sig? How does it work? And, larger concepts, outside of that realm as well. What does education look like next? I think in the world that we do have the clubhouses and, Twitter and a lot of different ways for people to talk authoritatively about these concepts. Where do you think we're going with that? Are we going in a good direction in which people are getting the knowledge they need to make proper decisions?
Yeah, I've been hugely impressed with what's been going on at Clubhouse, right? And just the grassroots conversations of people asking questions and then getting answers from experts. I mean, certainly I think, Jameson's going to be better at telling us how fast things are developing and, the state of the art. In terms of the education, I think, the best teacher is the Bitcoin price, right? As Bitcoin becomes more valuable and people feel like they're missing out and they want to become a participant in the economy, that's going to create that drive for people to ask questions. I think that we're much better prepared today than we were in previous cycles. Alyse was talking a little bit earlier about, what happened in 2017. And if you're new and just kind of plugging into Bitcoin, that was a period in which, there was all sorts of different cryptocurrencies. They were all kind of going up at around the same time. And just education really wasn't there yet. I think she mentioned the specifics where, there was even kind of multiple versions of the Bitcoin blockchain, like sort of competing at exchanges, and it wasn't clear what users were getting. I think this time around, right, there's a lot more people in the space who have taken the time to understand how to build these products, to iterate on them, and certainly I don't feel like I was able to make the same recommendations that I was to people last time around in 2017 when people were asking me how to get into the industry. I think, now there's a lot better, literature and education, whether it's on Kraken or somewhere else, right? You can kind of go on to most of these exchange websites or crypto news websites, and they'll tell you how to, about different wallets and about different opportunities and how to really kind of, start doing it and do it in a good way, right? I think we're all learning together, right? So even the foremost experts in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency are learning, right? The space is 12 years old and it's accomplished a lot, but it's evolving. And the other thing I would mention to people is that it's a participatory industry, right? This is new stuff, and if you're coming in and learning, sharing that is a great way to give back. That's certainly how I got started. There's certainly a lot of need for people who can think through maybe what those next generation of products looks like. So if you're, thinking about career opportunities or open to that kind of thing, you might find the barrier to entry in Bitcoin and working on some of these problems. Certainly once you get a little bit more advanced with it, but you might find that even interesting yourself.
So I'll add that I think that some of the institutions, organizations, and municipal participation, level participation that is happening will come along with education. And so to provide one example, we saw earlier this month that Miami Mayor Suarez introduced a resolution for Miami to become a city that was, proactive and progressively integrating Bitcoin into, city life. And so Mayor Suarez talked about allowing employees to accept salary partially in Bitcoin and allowing residents to pay city fees in Bitcoin. And what was immediately followed by Mayor Suarez's introduction of this resolution was an amendment by Commissioner Russell of Miami's 2nd District to say that, he's supportive of this, but that should be done in partnership with educators, and that as the option to accept salary in Bitcoin is introduced or to pay fees in Bitcoin is introduced, so too should education on Bitcoin's price volatility and opportunities for better security and privacy and all of this. And so I think that it's incumbent upon folks at the institutional or community level to be thinking about education as they're thinking about the introduction of this technology. And one of the reasons why it's important to do it, I think, at that level versus just on Clubhouse, though Clubhouse, I agree with Pete, has been particularly good at this, is that, frankly, as we've, it's been, Bitcoin was introduced over a decade ago, and, I was lucky to come into the space in 2013, and I think, the other panelists maybe even probably earlier than me, and frankly, at that time, it was quite easy to find signal through the noise, and that you could go on YouTube and search for Bitcoin. And what you would find would be, several videos from Andreas Antonopoulos, and then, Adam Back describing fungibility, for instance. And today that's just not the case. And so if you go on to YouTube and search for Bitcoin, you're going to find a whole slew of different things, including, competing altcoins that are claiming that they themselves are Bitcoin. And even on Clubhouse, I think, we often see folks that, might be motivated by a marketing message versus by education. And so, given that there's, a much broader community now, and it's harder to decipher who's an expert and what their motivations might be, I think that, as communities are introduced to the technology and to Bitcoin as a currency, or as institutions introduce it, to their employees and to their user base, that hopefully will continue to be partnered with education.
I 100% agree with that. I think it, with having a voice comes a lot of power to steer decisions and steer people's knowledge. So, having, proper learning, I think, too, is helpful. And we go back to, there is so much you can learn about this space, and you'll never really get to expert status because there's so many layers to it. So, off of that, where would you guys recommend if someone in this room is like, I want to go learn more about this holistically? What is your go-to?
So I still like the old resources. So what I recommend folks to do is to check out Jameson's page, which I think is loft.net, right, Jameson?
Yeah, right? Though if it's easier for people to remember, bitcoin.page goes to the same place.
Perfect. So he has a really well-organized, almost like table of contents on what is Bitcoin, with various resources, educational resources for each of those, critical topics for Bitcoin. So I like that a lot. I think that Andreas Antonopoulos still continues to offer, and his old videos continue to be relevant on Bitcoin. And then finally, I think when digging into, what Bitcoin is beyond a method of payment or a store of value, and when looking at, why Bitcoin's such a good store of value, looking at videos on things like, fungibility or financial sovereignty can be really valuable. And so for me, the best, to look at, though they might be more academic and lengthy, are really some of the videos that present Adam Back speaking. I'm curious to what Pete and Jameson refer folks to beyond those resources.
Yeah, my main thing that I've learned the hard way over the years is that I try not to start with anything specific, because this is such a multifaceted space. You don't know, and you should not assume which parts of it are going to be interesting and are going to hook somebody. So that's why I usually try to get a feel for what type of person they are, and then, point them towards that sector, and, hopefully that will get their attention. And if they get hooked enough, then perhaps they'll eventually branch out and start educating themselves about all the other aspects of the space. But the main thing that I've learned the hard way is, if I start, going into a technical deep dive because that's interesting to me, I'm going to lose 99% of people.
Yeah, that's a good point. I also would echo that, saying, like, it's good to have conversations with people and figure out what is interesting to them. Even myself, right? It's like I understand a lot of things about Bitcoin, right? I've been in the industry for 8 years now. I still spend a couple hours a day learning about it, and even you're asking about the product side. And the different, ways to onboard. I think that's some of the stuff that is, for me, I'm just a regular consumer in that environment. I'm looking at products that work for me and making decisions based on my own, consumer trust that isn't dissimilar from me using any other product, right? So in some ways I'm in the same boat. I would also just give a shout out to the Bitcoin Magazine guys. They have a good page, bitcoinmagazine.com/start. Which has a lot of good resources if you're looking for kind of general information about, why Bitcoin is needed and like how it works. And I think you can explore from there. That's a good resource I've been pointing to people a lot of late too.
Wonderful. Thanks, guys. So I want to open it back up to questions again. So Alex, what do you have for us?
Hi, yes, thanks for your time. I guess my question is really, well, first a bit of a statement, which is, I think one of the ways you can spread your risk is by diversifying across both hardware wallets and kind of exchanges. So I have money on Kraken, but I also have a Trezor wallet, and I also use Coinbase and BlockFi and others. So what do you think about diversifying your risk across multiple different exchanges and ways of storing money? And the other one is that I think I do worry that, you know, this is the discussion we're having here about security is about early adopters, for people who have, you know, a significant amount of Bitcoin now. But what about for new people coming on? The reality is they are going to be stuck with a single exchange because they're going to have small amounts of money. They're not going to move across the blockchain. So a better question for them would be, how secure is my individual? You know, where should they go? Should they go to Kraken? Should they go somewhere else for security? But yes, first question is, what do you think about diversification as a way of adding security?
Yeah, this is a very common question. So common, in fact, that we have a blog post that one of our client services folks wrote a few months ago. And the gist of it, the title of the post was "Diversify Your Keys, Not Your Coins." And the best way that I can describe our thinking, and because we've had so many clients come to us who have the same type of setup, where historically they're flinging their coins all over the place into a variety of different security setups, which is good. I mean, diversity is good because what you're doing, of course, is you are reducing the risk that a single catastrophic scenario wipes you out. That, of course, is always a good thing. Now, the tricky thing, especially when you're talking about putting your coins into a wide variety of different single points of failure, where, you know, it may be custodians that could fail, it may be, you know, a single device that could fail, or a single seed backup that could get lost or destroyed. What you're doing when you're doing that is you're actually increasing the risk that you will have a small failure. So, you know, it's probably a good trade-off. You know, don't put all of your eggs in one basket. So it's better than just having everything in one single point of failure, obviously. But what we are trying to convey with our blog post and our ethos of multi-sig is that you can actually get the best of both worlds by having all of your money in one super high security setup, and that setup is robust against all types of different failure because the setup itself is distributed.
Thank you. That was good. And the other question about the, how we talk about security and risk for new people coming on board, because I'm sure there are a load of people coming on board at the moment, and all them,
Yeah.
It almost is about choosing the right third party.
Yeah, as I said at the beginning, I advise people to, obviously you have to set up an account in an exchange to make a purchase these days. I always advise people to buy a hardware wallet. They're just not too expensive. And I think, again, one of the risks to treating your Bitcoin like a number in an account is that that's all it ever is to you. And I feel like, for me, that was one of the biggest hurdles to get over, right? If you have Bitcoin just a number in account to you, like a E-Trade kind of thing, I don't think you'll ever really appreciate the system at all. And I think, psychologically, you'll just open yourself up to more issues at that point, because if you don't understand what Bitcoin is, and you're not going to treat it with that sort of respect, right? You're not going to understand why you might go to these lengths to kind of protect your Bitcoin, even if as you said, you might not have, quote, that much today. Well, if you understand the Bitcoin system and you understand, how it'll become programmatically more scarce over time, well, then you'll understand that you would want to maybe do something like set up your own hardware wallet, because it is a long-term, savings type financial transaction, perhaps. So I try to get people to kind of step outside that box and get them to just see that treating it as a number in an account, it sets you up for psychological issues that in some ways that can impact your use just as much as anything else.
I agree. I guess my point is, I think that say the price kind of increase carries on the way it's going at the moment, you end up with $1 million Bitcoin, then just moving off an exchange will be quite an expensive transaction.
Well, I mean, different exchanges are doing different things, right? At Kraken, we're making commitment to the Lightning Network, which we think is going to lower withdrawal fees pretty substantially for clients that want to take advantage of that. So, Pierre Richard, who's our internal Bitcoin lead, he's building up a team around that. We're hoping to have that live pretty soon, and it seems like other exchanges are starting to take that issue seriously and starting to think about ways to lower that cost.
So I spoke earlier a bit about how custody has matured between this bull cycle and the last in 2017. And I want to respond to your question, Alex, from that angle. So this is a little bit of a Casa pitch, but, frankly, Stillmark is really only investing in companies that we believe in and that we would recommend to our own families. So I'll take the liberty to do a bit of a Casa pitch here. In 2017, when the bull market, one of the signs of every bull market is that family and friends start asking you how and where they should buy their first Bitcoin, right? I think that everyone on stage, certainly, and probably folks in the audience can all relate to this. In 2017, given the state of custody solutions, when friends and family asked me that, I felt, frankly, like I had to refer them to Coinbase. That's not because I thought that Coinbase was, an optimal solution for them, but because I thought it was the best possible solution, and it simplified the process of purchase and storage, right? Because Coinbase, essentially, you would have an IOU for Bitcoin, basically, if you're using Coinbase. Now, what Casa has done in 2020 is added a buy Bitcoin button. And so what you can do now with Casa, and what I am referring my friends and family who are new in 2020 and 2021 to Bitcoin, I'm referring them to Casa so that they establish their secure custody first, and then they can use Casa's Buy Bitcoin feature or a direct relationship with Casa's client services to buy Bitcoin second, as something that happens after they've already established, a proper setup for secure custody. And I think this is something that can really empower new users to feel like they're hitting the ground, kind of from a mature and more sophisticated place. They don't need to take the 2 steps of purchasing from an exchange and then figuring out secure custody, but that can kind of be all something that's done together as part of a package deal.
Okay, thank you. I definitely will check out Casa as part of my diversification. So let's see how that goes. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Alex. I wanted to just do a really quick time check for everyone. Does anyone have a hard stop, or just so we can kind of keep that in mind as we're letting people in?
I do at 1:30.
1:30. Okay, cool. All right. Well, Paul, please, what is your question?
What's up, y'all? This is Paul, obviously, and I'm the proud owner and HODLer of my grandma's Bitcoin in Casa. And she always hits me with questions about, are you going to get taxed and whatnot? Because it's all for her grandchildren. And I know Casa's all about that and has plans for that. But if Jameson or somebody could just talk to how that actually works and why it's beneficial to set up that way.
I think I missed a little bit of that. Was you were asking if you would, get taxed on holding?
Yeah, so you don't get taxed. So I have the grandma's Bitcoin, but that's actually for her 5 grandkids, and she's afraid that I'll somehow be taxed giving it to them. But I don't think that's a thing, right?
Right. Well, standard disclosure that I'm not a tax accountant and cannot give any legal advice, and I don't even know your jurisdiction, but at least in the United States, when it comes to giving appreciated assets, I know there are various gift thresholds. I think it's like $15,000 a year per person or something like that. So basically the question becomes, are there taxable events? And that's, when the money starts moving and when those other people start taking possession of it, that's when you have to start asking yourself, are there taxable events happening here? And are they above or below any gift thresholds, and so on and so forth? And of course, it can get pretty complicated. And this is the type of thing where you want to consult a professional, because if you start planning for it today, you can get yourself in a much better position than if it's something that you're dealing with years from now.
Awesome. And Casa does have some solutions and some content on that, right?
Regarding tax planning advice, not that I'm aware of, though, we are constantly building out networks of attorneys, and I know we do have a partnership or two with some of the crypto tax platforms out there, so we can definitely make referrals for you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Paul, was part of your question whether or not you helping your grandmother manage her Casa account would expose you personally, Paul, to a taxable event?
That's, yes.
Got it. Okay, so that's what I thought you were asking. So my understanding is that your help on the technology front isn't going to expose you to a taxable event, but as Jameson said, of course, none of us are tax advisors, although Casa does have partnerships with folks that have built entire businesses just on this space in particular. And so, Jameson, Emily, do you remember the name of the group that we work with so we can give them a little shout out? Escaping me right now. Paul, I'll find that and we'll mention it before we close the discussion today.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'm trying to think, Alyse, off the top of my head too. Do a little recon here in a second.
I thought it was crypto tax, but I could be wrong.
Okay.
Crypto trader tax, but there's so many of them, and they have such similar names that you can get jumbled up.
Well, Paul, as we're taking this next question, I will do some recon for you. So hang tight.
Okay, awesome. I'll stay on.
Okay, and the next up, Hakab. I'm hoping I'm not butchering your name. What do you got for us?
It's Hakab.
Okay, noted.
It's like Jacob. Yeah, but I appreciate the opportunity. I wanted to switch things up a little bit and still within the privacy topic and security topic, but I've been trying to get an answer about the use of exchanges or decentralized exchanges like Bisq and HODL and ATMs, and the concept of tainted coins came up, and I understand that Bitcoin maximalists will say that there's no such thing as a tainted coin, but in the case of certain exchanges and certain ATMs, they're obviously monitoring. And my background is forensic accounting, and so this is kind of like a mind exercise for me, and just trying to understand where the logic is in terms of fungibility and privacy, or where that crossroad is. So if someone wanted to use a Bisq and a peer-to-peer exchange and accidentally expose themselves to UTXOs that have been exposed to illicit activity, what are the ramifications if you later go to like a KYC exchange and try to sell it for dollars, as well as how can you maintain privacy from bad actors on the other side from finding out your information or targeting you, because with Bisq, I played around with it a little bit. It's not something that I was really actively engaging, but what I noticed was a lot of them required Zelle as a payment method, and with Zelle, you have your email and your phone number as an option instead of a username. So that kind of exposes you to certain risks. So how do you get around? I guess the first question is there a fungibility issue with painted coins? And then how do you protect your privacy with certain avenues like peer-to-peer exchanges and BISC or decentralized exchanges?
Yeah, I mean, there definitely can be fungibility issues. We've seen a number of different exchanges that will shut down your account if you are within so many hops of what they consider to be a suspicious transaction. And this is, I mean, it's absurd and crazy because, if anyone knows the whole 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon thing, I think some of these exchanges are doing up to 3 hops away, which of course you have no control over what happens to your Bitcoin after you send it to someone else. So it's a dangerous path that some of these providers are going down, and I don't even know off the top of my head which ones are probably the riskiest and known to be doing that. So that's almost more of an ecosystem-wide issue because there's not a lot that you can do about that other than, I guess, sort of washing the coins back and forth between a bunch of wallets that you own and know that there won't be any quote-unquote illicit activity associated with. But on the flip side, people who want to improve their privacy and theoretically improve their fungibility of their coins, and they're using privacy software like HODLers and mixers and whatnot, they're potentially exposing themselves to getting deplatformed and actually may accidentally be deplatforming other people who get caught up, in that sweep of being within a few hops of the actual mixer usage. So it's, as someone who cares about privacy, it's not a very fun thing to be looking at and dealing with these days because some of the actors out there will basically assume you're a criminal if you try to improve your privacy. Meanwhile, you can accidentally be associated with actual criminals even if you're not doing anything wrong. So I can't really say there's any foolproof way to protect yourself from that. And the same thing kind of applies just on the AML, KYC, or your identity side, is that the only way to stay truly private is to never give up any sensitive information. And so as soon as you leak that information to anyone or anything, who knows what might happen to it after that point. So I would say, the peer-to-peer trading platforms are probably safer because you're probably only exposing yourself and your information to a much smaller number of entities. But, anything that gets out on the internet can potentially become public.
Yeah, I mean, and on the flip side, how does that if people start using coin joins and mixers, how does that impact the risk from a financial institution side? Because I guess from their perspective, they don't want the regulators at their door saying that, XYZ UTXO came from, a North Korean hacker, and now it's on your exchange, so explain that. And so they do have to take some steps to kind of mitigate that. How do we balance those two so that we don't give up too much of our privacy? And I know Swan Bitcoin does something where they KYC you, but they don't track your wallet address after you take it off the platform. But how do you kind of square that circle?
Yeah, I can't really speak to too much of that specifically. I would say it's probably a good reminder that, most exchanges, Kraken included, we're pretty heavily regulated with financial institutions at this point, right? Like Kraken is, even recently in Wyoming, we secured a bank, banking license, right? So we, are a bank in many ways. So yeah, I don't know if I can answer your question specifically other than, I think if that's something that you're passionate about, that's great. And I think you should just, be aware of some of the differences when you're interacting with different people within the Bitcoin economy. And, the exchanges are certainly, going to continue to need to operate in a certain way in order to, make Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies more accessible to the average person. But, we certainly applaud any experimentation and,
on the privacy side or the security side.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I think Pete alluded to this a bit, but I think that, exchanges and other providers are responsive to the demands and the priorities of their user base, right? So, we should continue to surface as users the things that are important to us and the values that we hold, and ask these sorts of questions of them. I also wanted to quickly just circle back to Paul's question and just say that our partner, Casa's partner, is CoinTracker, and CoinTracker provides a 10% discount for their tax consulting services to Casa members.
Thanks, Alyse. Jacob, anything else on that note, or you feel good? Okay, moving on. So, Brett, what question we got for us?
Hi, guys. So I guess a question that I've been getting from a lot of people, family members and friends that have most of their money in retirement accounts. How do you think they should go about like investing? I've been recommending GBTC, but I suspect that the premium will continue to fall.
Yeah, GBTC, I believe, has essentially become so financialized at this point. There's so much activity going on, with BlockFi and other institutions, that the premium is at almost historical lows. Like, I think I've seen it fall below 3% recently. I think it's gone back up, in the past few days, but that huge, what used to be like 30, 40, 50+% premium is maybe gone forever at this point. And, a lot of us thought that it would stay in place until there was an ETF, but I think that, so much more activity has been created to arbitrage that premium away that it's fairly a safe bet that it's gonna stay close to the underlying value at this point.
Yeah, but trying to weigh it with, there's like Bitcoin IRA and some other solutions, and just kind of weighing, okay, you're paying a 2% fee, and I think when I've been recommending it, it's been at 8%, and that seems better to just take that, but be with somebody that is maybe more mature in custody.
Yeah, I mean, GBTC, I think, takes close to a 2% fee per year. So a lot of these are taking, the custodial options are taking what I would consider to be insane annual fees, and they're going to keep doing that until there is a real ETF or a lot of ETFs. They're going to bring that down from a competitive standpoint. Now, there are a lot of other options, of course, that will let you do self-directed IRAs, which I've also done. And if you go that route, then I think then you might as well go all the way and actually self-custody the assets, and then that you're not going to be paying BIPs on your assets because you're going to be holding them yourself.
Okay, so that sounds interesting. Where would be a good place for somebody to start?
Well, if you go to lock.net or bitcoin.page, I have a section, I think it's the subsection under buying and selling Bitcoin, and then there's a even smaller subsection on that page for retirement accounts, and I've got a number of options listed there.
We also have a partnership there, so I'll continue to be the Casa promo person, I guess, for this panel. But Kingdom Trust has a no annual fee IRA product, and Casa is the self-custody's partner, and Fidelity is their custody solution partner.
Okay, that's great. I don't want to take up too much time here, but I had another question. Maybe it's in this information, but how do people manage wills? I don't want to necessarily share my keys, but I figure a good way I'll probably lose them is when I die. So, Like, how are people approaching that problem?
Well, yeah, that's an entirely different problem set. One which Casa, of course, has a solution for. It's of course using multi-sig. It's also using the estate process to ensure that at any given point of time you have a signing quorum of keys that are accessible to you, but there's also a signing quorum of keys that can be accessed through the estate process, with the appropriate legal proof of death presented to the various key holders. This is, I would say, a fairly bespoke solution that we came up with after having someone spend basically a year architecting it out along with myself. And if you talk to most other people, then they are probably using some of the standard guidance. The best one, there's actually a book out there about crypto inheritance by Pamela Morgan, which I do recommend. I learned a number of things from that myself. It was very helpful to think through from an adversarial perspective, just potential edge cases. But I think in a lot of other cases, what we've seen people do is they basically create what we would call a treasure map, and then they distribute various instructions to the treasure map to their beneficiaries. And the main problem with this is that people don't have experience architecting robust security solutions, and so they often come up with a treasure hunt that works fine in the happy case, but is not very resistant to partial failures, and so tends to have various single points of failure where something can go wrong, and usually it's not very well tested either. So obviously you want this thing to be completely bulletproof, because if something goes wrong, you're not going to be around to help troubleshoot it.
Excellent, thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Brett, for the question. So we're going to wrap this up with Pratik, and then before we get into that question, though, I wanted to encourage everyone to follow Master Bitcoin Today, this particular club, and you can do that by clicking on that greenhouse that's at the very top above the speakers, and that'll allow you to join and check out all the other programming that they have running. So thank you today for them for hosting us as well, to Amanda and the team. So Pratik, what question do you have for us?
Hey guys, thanks for having me up here. I've been listening for a while. You guys are awesome. Post some really interesting stuff and interesting topics here. So thank you. And my question is, it's about the total market cap of all of cryptos and Bitcoin specifically and its position. So right now the total market cap, Bitcoin's taking up 60% of it, or 61% or something. And I wanted to ask about all the other altcoins that are out there. Do you think that at some point those other altcoins might reach up to taking more market share? And what's the point of those other altcoins if they're so low in the market cap of the total crypto market?
Well, market cap is a terrible metric in general, because there's a lot of things it doesn't take into account. The short version I would say is that I'm actually kind of surprised that Bitcoin has been able to keep such a large portion of the market cap so far. Is really more, I think, a reflection on the rest of the market than it is on Bitcoin. The reason that I say that is it doesn't take much to create a new crypto asset and create 100 million tokens, and it does not reflect the liquidity and the depth of the value in these various networks. So I think that if you're going to look at some sort of economic comparisons, you really need to look at something more like order book depth for the various altcoin trading pairs, rather than just market cap, because market cap is so easily manipulable, and I generally just discount it as a vanity metric and something to look at once in a while and have a laugh.
Yeah, I have a little bit of a simpler framework for this, which is I think that it's easy to understand. Bitcoin is an innovation. It's a
innovation in the open source software space, and most other crypto assets are just claims to future innovations. I think that's like a good way to think about it. In terms of just, often if you really dig into what they're doing, either they're saying that they will do something in the future or they're promising that they will do something in the future. So I think you want to keep that in mind. I think kraken.com/learn has a pretty good section on some of the different coins, and I think they're often explained pretty well and colloquially there. But yeah, I think, look, there's a big difference in some of these tools that we're using. They create false impressions, right? So just because there's a website that you see that includes a bunch of names of cryptocurrencies with logos and it shows the prices of them, that doesn't really mean that these things are similar. It just means that someone chose to kind of portray data to you in a certain way like that. I would say that Bitcoin at this point has, achieved a lot more on a technical level and than most of the other coins, and that if you do want to get involved in the rest of the cryptocurrency space, I wouldn't necessarily discourage that, but I would encourage you to learn a lot more about why Bitcoin works the way it does and how it's designed, that will give you the basis to kind of understand where a lot of these other projects are coming from. I do think a lot of it is, it's hard to really parse the difference between, the promises and the claims and what's actually occurring.
Yep, that's the answer I was looking for, as far as Bitcoin, because it seems like their value is high, but does it really have the actual, technology value that it's adding to the market as well? Or is it kind of people just know crypto, but the main crypto that people know is Bitcoin, so that's why they're a lot of people are buying it without really thinking about but you know what, there's Stellar or Cardano or Litecoin or something, Ethereum, that has a better proof of work that might be even better than Bitcoin. It has better value than it. But from what you're saying, Rizzo, is I'm getting that Bitcoin actually does have a better value, and maybe that's probably why they even have a higher market.
Well, Bitcoin the reason that the whole market exists is Bitcoin, right? So Bitcoin, when it was created, had a $0 value, right? It was created, and it was unique and novel at the point that it was created, right? There was no Bitcoin before Bitcoin, right? There was just nothing else. So I think taking the time to understand why Bitcoin was created and what it's trying to achieve and how it's different. Prior to Bitcoin, there had only really been, you basically needed a government in a large country to start your own economy, right? It's great that Bitcoin lowers the cost to doing that, but that is still something that Bitcoin did first, and that wasn't possible before it. And, as I said before earlier, we're all learning here, and it's still pretty new, right? Bitcoin's only 12 years old, right? And I think that if you look at the history of money, there's only really a few chapters in that story. There's gold, there's a bunch of government currencies, and now there's Bitcoin. So what comes from that? I'll be open-ended and say, look, I'm not short humanity. I'm not short people figuring out different ways to do things with new technologies. But after 12 years, Bitcoin has come a long way. It's demonstrated a cyclical market over time. It's demonstrated a huge ability to attract smart people and innovators and keep them in the system. And some of these other projects, as exciting as they may be, they maybe haven't delivered on the claims that they're making on the same level, right? So I go back to that heuristic, which is that Bitcoin is an innovation, right? It's an invention. Bitcoin was invented. There was nothing before it like it. And then, cryptocurrencies at large are attempts to build off of that, right, in some way. We don't really quite know what the end result of that effort to replicate, improve, to try to do something like Bitcoin is going to be. But if you look at the 12 years of progress on that, the results haven't been super great.
I think I'll... Go ahead, Jameson.
I was just going to say, if you've been around long enough and you really look at the history of a lot of altcoins, it's been interesting to see the variations on a theme. But the first wave of altcoins were literally doing nothing other than tweaking a few of the design parameters of Bitcoin, like the mining algorithm, block time, so on and so forth. And of course, in hindsight, it's ridiculous to think that anybody actually cares about those little things. But the variation on the theme that we keep seeing with a lot of altcoins is that they are taking a fundamental idea and then trying to do it a little bit better. And so there's, of course, a variation on Bitcoin, where a lot of different networks are trying to do it
same except better and faster and cheaper. And that narrative has generally not done well over the past 3 years. And then, of course, there's the Ethereum and the more rich smart contracting languages. And I think we're actually seeing the same thing happen now, where Ethereum is having its own scaling pains. And now we're seeing a lot of folks come out with variations on a theme. We're going to do Ethereum, but smarter, faster, cheaper. And I suspect it's probably going to play out the same way.
So I'll just, I'm going to be arriving 5 minutes late to my next call to just add in here, Patrick. And I think that sometimes when the question is asked, what's the difference between Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, the answers that are given can be quite confusing because, frankly, Bitcoiners often come from a place of, technology first, and some of their responses can sound more academic and open. And I would say that other cryptocurrencies and blockchains can be characterized, to be perhaps more marketing orientated, or just frankly to have better marketers that exist within the ecosystem. And so their messaging is crisper and, more assertive and aggressive. But I think what's very clear in the history of Bitcoin and the other blockchains as well is that Bitcoin has always optimized for stability and security, and other protocols have tended to optimize for the utility that can be achieved on that blockchain without giving, and then putting security and stability, as their second priority. And sometimes it seems to be a quite distant second. So where Bitcoin has started with security and stability, we know that Bitcoin, the protocol, has had 99.98% uptime since its inception. And we haven't seen a protocol breach. And of course, that's quite unique amongst protocols. The same can't be said of others. And where other protocols may offer the ability to do, function X, Y, or Z, and that was what they did first. Now Bitcoin is in the process of adding that as well. And so kind of catching up on the creative side. And the reason I think why, Bitcoin plays catch up there on the utility side, or even on the marketing side, is because what's been prioritized is really the technology. Is this secure? Are we offering hard promises to users that we can continue to fulfill year after year and decade after decade? And are we taking the fact that folks have, significant portions, in some cases, of their net worth on this protocol? Are we taking that seriously enough? And so I think when I look at the market cap today, I agree with everything Jameson and Pete said about, market cap not being, perhaps like a very serious metric because of how it can be played around with. But frankly, I'd expect that in the going forward, when we take a real long-term approach and look out a decade or two, that in fact, Bitcoin will be much more of the market than it even is today. And on that note, I'm going to jump, and thank you to Emily, Jameson, Pete, Amanda for including me on this conversation. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks so much, Alyse.
Yeah, same here, Emily. Amanda, I have to hop. Jameson
Wait, Alyse, real quick, just last one, because I'm really curious. So does speed matter in this, like speed of sending Bitcoin to another person? Because if at some point we use this as a currency, like won't people want to think like, all right, how fast can you send it from one place to the other?
For some applications, yes, and that's what I think you're going to end up having to do layer 2 networks for, because quite simply, any of these layer 1 networks that are a global broadcast to everyone in the entire world, it just doesn't scale. There's no way you can scale something that has to flood out to everyone who wants to participate on the network. So it's scaling the same way that the internet itself scaled, with a multiple layer model where the higher and higher layers become more efficient. But of course, you end up making trade-offs as a result of that.
Gotcha. Appreciate that.
Thanks, guys. Well, thank you. Thanks, everyone, so much for attending today. Again, Mastering Bitcoin today. Love for you to join the group. You just click on that greenhouse at the top. We have recorded this, and it will be available on Casa's YouTube. Casa HODL is the Twitter handle, and we'll be doing distribution through that as well. So thanks, everyone, for attending today. And Jameson, Alyse, Pete, thank you so much for your insights. This has been wonderful.
Thanks.